Welcome back to Zone for Geeks. My name is Casey, and today we're going to be configuring an FS.com switch. Specifically, we're going to be using the FS S3400 24-port PoE switch. Now, I'm going to connect to the console using PuTTY, so I already have that loaded. There are a few changes that we need to make before we actually connect, so I'm going to go ahead and load the profile. And you'll need to set the speed to 115,200. You'll obviously need to set your COM port. And then over here under keyboard, we need to change the backspace to Control H. Otherwise, you won't actually be able to use the backspace key, and it will be very, very annoying. Alright, so let's go ahead and load this, and then we will open. Now, while this is loading, I should say that this switch retails for around $450. I bought mine from eBay for $100. So because of that, I'm going to actually reset the config. So let's go ahead, and I'm actually already logged in, but the default username and password is going to be admin. So let's do enable, and then check out our directory. We can see our startup config there. So I'm just going to delete startup config. We're going to ask if we want to, we say yes, and then we're going to do a reboot. And as soon as this reboots, I will come back. Alright, we should be good to go now, so I'm going to hit enter to continue. And like I said, the default username is going to be admin and admin. And then if we go back into our enable and look at our directory, we no longer have our startup config, so we are starting with a blank configuration. If you want to actually see your configuration, you can do show config, but we have no config file. So let's do this. Let's write, that should create the config file, and then if we do show config, and here we can see all of our non-existent configurations. So let's go ahead and close out of that as soon as it catches up. Alright, so now I'm going to go ahead and set this up. This is going to be a switch that I use in my lab. So let's, first thing I want to do is I just want to go ahead and set up the host name. So we're just going to do, first we need to go into our configuration mode, and we're going to do host name, and then just give it a name. And you can see right off the bat, our switch has changed from just switch to our new host name. I want to go ahead and set up an NTP server. So we're going to do NTP server and then give it an IP address. And if you're not familiar with the commands, all you have to do is just hit the question mark, and that will pull up a list. And if you know some of it, so for example the MTP, and then just hit the question mark, it will give you a list of commands that you can use with that command. So we did NTP, so if I do NTP server and question mark, then I'm told I need to assign an IP address, which I've already done. So now that we have our NTP server set up, the last thing that I want to do for just the standard maintenance is I want to go ahead and set up an SNMP server, or not an actual server, but I want to go ahead and enable SNMP and give it a community. So we're going to do SNMP and question mark once again, and then we're going to do community. And then we're going to do 0 because we're going to be using this switch only allows for versions 1 and 2, not 3. So we're not going to be sending encrypted information. And then we need to give it our community name. So we're just going to do ZFT. And then I always use R0 or RW for read only, read write, whatever the case may be. Although we do need to specify that by just adding it right there. And now our SNMP community has been created. Alright, so the next thing we need to do is we need to go ahead and add some VLANs. Before we get started, let's go ahead and see what we actually have by default. So if we do show, get my fingers on the right key, show VLAN, we can see we have one VLAN, which is VLAN 1 with a name of default, and that is assigned to all of our ports. If we do a show int or show IP int brief, then we can actually see that we have an IP address assigned to it of 192.168.1.1, which means we can plug in our computer into any one of these ports, give it an IP address within that same network, and then be able to actually connect to the web interface if that's what we wanted to do. We're actually going to look at the web interface in a little bit. But in the meantime, let's go ahead and add some VLANs. So in order to do that, we just need to do VLAN and then give it the VLAN ID. So I'm going to do VLAN 25. And then we want to give it a name. So I'm going to do name. And this is going to be SVR management. And that's it. We have now created our VLAN. So if we exit out of that and then do show VLAN again, you can see now we have our VLAN 25 under SVR management. But we don't actually have an IP address and we haven't actually done anything with it yet. So let's go ahead and take care of that right now. So I'm going to do interface VLAN 25. And then we want to give it an IP address. That brings the VLAN up, by the way. So we're going to give an IP address of 10.1.25.254 with a subnet mask of 255.255.255.0. And then once again, if we come in here and we do a show IP int brief, we can now see our VLAN 25 along with our IP address. And when we want to save, we just simply do write. And then we can actually, if we do a show config, we should be able to see our VLAN information down here somewhere. One problem with connecting through a console is that the connection is fairly slow, so you may want to connect through SSH if that's a possibility. But we can see right here we have our two VLANs. Alright, so I'm going to do this for the rest of the VLANs that I need to create. So we're just going to do VLAN 50. Give it a name. 75. Alright, so now I have all of my VLANs that I'm going to be creating. So we can do show VLANs, make sure that they are all there. What did I do? I'll show VLAN, I should say. And so now we can see all of our VLANs are there. So I'm going to just go ahead and speed this through real fast so you guys don't have to sit here and watch me type out all of these IP addresses. So give me just a sec. Alright, so now I have all of our VLANs created and we have given them IP addresses. So the next thing that we need to do is we need to actually assign these VLANs to a port. So I know that port 1 is going to be connected to my firewall, and I know that port 24 is going to be connected to a new virtualization server that I'm building. So for that reason, I know both of them will need to be trunked, and they will have both tagged and untagged VLANs. All the other ports are most likely going to be untagged, and they'll be in access mode. So let's go ahead and get that set up real fast. So in order to do this, we just need to go to interface. Let's see here. Gigabit 01, and then we're going to do switch port mode trunk. And so now our switch port has been shifted from access to trunk. This means that we can pass multiple VLANs across the same interface. And let's go ahead and do that for our 24, our port 24. So interface gigabit 024. Switch port mode trunk, and there we go. So now we have both ports 24 and port 1 set for trunk, and we can actually do a show config. And let's just go to port 1 and we should see that we do not. So let's, I need to write the config. So let's do this once again. And now we can see that it is set for trunk mode. All right, so next thing I want to do is I'm going to assign VLANs to my specific ports that I'm going to be using. So like I said, port 24 is going to be for server virtualization. Port 23 is going to be for my VLAN 75, which is going to be my gaming VLAN. So let's do interface gig 023. And then this is going to be access. So that means it's only going to have one VLAN attached to it. And then if we do switch ports, and then VLAN, I don't remember the command. PVID. So switch port PVID, and then we need to give it our ID. So in this case, it's going to be VLAN 75. And then let's go ahead and do that for our wireless, which is going to be on port number 22. So gigabit Ethernet 0/22. We need to change it to access, switch port mode, access, and then switch port PVID 100. And then our cameras, we have 5 cameras, so they're going to be on ports 17 through 21. So in this case, instead of going into each individual port, we can actually just do a range. So if I do interface, range, and then gigabits, and we're going to do 0/17/21. So that will be ports 17 through 21. And we can see right here in our config, it actually says that we're using a range. And so now we will do switch ports mode access, and then switch ports PVID, and that's going to be 125. And now if we hit exit and then we write, and we should be able to see this information on our config. So let's just do show VLAN. And so right here we can see our server management is going to be on 1 and 24, and that's because once again those are trunk ports, so we're going to be passing that VLAN across both of those. If you, for example, let's just say my gaming is probably not going to need to have access to port 24. It will need port 1 because all of my traffic will pass through my firewall, but it probably won't need access to port 24, which is for my virtualization server. So we can actually go in and remove that. So if we do interface gigabits 0/24, and then if we do switch port trunk, and then it's going to be VLAN allowed, and I believe it's remove. Yep, remove, and then we're going to remove our VLAN, which is going to be 75. And so now we've removed VLAN 75 from our port 24. And if we do show VLAN, we should see that. So we no longer have port 24 listed. And that's how you actually set up your VLANs, give them IP addresses, and technically right now I can plug everything in and then it should work. This switch is not going to be acting as a DHCP server, so right now my firewall is my DHCP server. However, once my virtualization server is up, I will create a DHCP server with that, and I'll have to come in here and possibly set up some routing, but in the meantime I have not gotten that configured yet. So let's go ahead and actually take a look at the web interface so we can actually see everything that we've done in a graphical sense. So first things first, I want to go ahead and I want to write, so that way we save all of our configurations. And then I need to change the actually, so if we do a show IP int brief, you will notice that all of this is 10.1, but I have not changed the VLAN on this one yet. This will be, or the IP address. So this is going to be 10.1.1.1. However, that is my current working subnet. So if I change this to 10.1.1.1, it's going to start causing problems. So I'm going to leave this separate for now, so that way I can still come in here and play around with things without actually affecting my live network. But once I'm ready to actually shift all of my cables into the new switch, I will go in and change this IP address to the 10.1.1.1. But in the meantime, I need to go ahead and set up my adapter here. So let's change this, and we're just going to go 192.168.1.2, and we're going to leave that as is. So now what I need to do is I need to actually go plug the cable into my switch. So I will be right back. Alright, so I have plugged in the cable, and I've navigated my browser to 192.168.1.1. Our password is just going to be our default admin and admin. And let's see what we have here. So first things first, I'm going to click on this port panel, and that's just going to give me a quick overview of my ports. We can see the device info here. This is just going to have our serial number, IP addresses, things of that nature. Let's see what else we have. So these are we only have one thing connected right now, but we can see that we're running in 1 gig with a full duplex. And let's come down here and take a look. We'll see our host name. So this is the host name that we changed on our switch. Clock management should have our NTP server. That's going to be my firewall. And if we look at, we can add port descriptions, which I generally don't do just because they change so often. It's a little bit of a headache. And then we can actually configure the port. Change. Mostly what you're going to do in here is you're going to either enable and disable or change the speed or the duplex. And then let's go and take a look at our layer 2 connection. So this will have our VLAN information, and then we can see all of our VLANs that we created. If we just click on edit, we can see that 1 and 24 is our trunk access, and we can see the IP or VLANs assigned to each one of them. Now notice that even though 1 and 24 are trunk access, we only see VLAN 1 here, and that's because that is going to be our untagged default VLAN. So it does still have all of the other VLANs that we've assigned to it, but this is just going to be the default, which is going to be our untagged. It's important to remember that when you're looking at the web interface, it's not going to be as useful as the command line interface. A lot of times there's only certain things you can do in the command line, and for me personally, I like the command line because I like to automate things. So if I had 15 switches like this, then I could send out a command that would make adjustments to all 15 at the same time, and I wouldn't have to log in. Same thing here, if I wanted to assign, for example, VLAN 125, I would have to click on each one, assign it, and then apply it, whereas before I just did the range, and I was able to make those changes to every one of the interfaces at the same time. If we come down to our layer 3 config, we should be able to see our information about our actual VLANs, and we can create new ones if we want, and these will immediately show up on our switch, or we can actually edit and configure these. We don't have any DHCP servers set up, as I mentioned before. And then if we come to, let's see, where is it? Maybe diagnostics. Nope. Right here. So we can see our community that we created for SNMP. And then eventually I'll also get Zabbix set up to monitor that as well. And we can also make access control lists. And then if we come down here, we can copy our startup config. So if we want to set up the switch as a default configuration and then make a copy of that so we have it for future switches, we can do that. And then we can also import. So if our switch, for whatever reason, we needed to erase the config and restart it, we could do that, or reload it. And then we can obviously upload our software and reboot our switch. So the web interface does have some uses. I generally, again, just prefer the command line, and primarily it's because I use software that just gives me full access to that right off the bat. So while I'm using PuTTY to connect to it, I do have remote access management software that will allow me to connect to every one of my switches with just a click of a button. And so it's just really convenient. But that is going to be it for this video. As I build my virtualization server, I'm going to bring you guys along. So we're actually going to be installing Proxmox and loading up all of the server software, Plex, DHCP servers, everything that I'm going to use in my home lab. And so stick around if you guys want to see that. In the meantime, go ahead and leave me a comment below if you have any questions or comments. Hit that thumbs up, and I'll catch you on the next one.